They look calm. That is the part that fools everyone. Their voice stays steady. Their face stays controlled. Their days keep moving as if nothing inside them has changed. But that is only what the outside shows. The truth is quieter, heavier, and much harder to notice. Some people do not fall apart in public. They do it behind closed doors, in the late hours, in the silence after the noise is gone, when there is nobody left to perform for and nowhere left to hide. And if you stay with me, you will understand why this kind of pain cuts deeper than obvious heartbreak. Because this is not about losing someone in a clean, simple way. This is about being left with something unfinished, something half-held and half-gone, something the mind cannot close and the heart cannot carry without shaking under the weight of it. That is why they still act normal. That is why they still answer messages, show up, smile, work, laugh, and move through life as if the story ended already. It did not. Not inside them. And the more they pretend it is over, the more the feeling slips underground and grows in the dark. So before you think they forgot, before you imagine they felt nothing, listen closely. Because what breaks a person is not always what the world can see. Sometimes it is what never fully ended, what never became real enough to stay, and never disappeared enough to leave. They are quietly breaking, even if you would never know it at first glance. Around other people, they keep everything together almost perfectly, like nothing in them has shifted at all. Your name still leaves their mouth like it carries no special weight, like it is just another sound in an ordinary day. But the second they are alone, something inside gives way. Not loudly, not in a dramatic scene anyone could point to. It happens in silence, like pressure building behind glass, until one invisible crack becomes many. It spreads under the surface before anything on the outside begins to show. And this is what matters most. You did not leave their life in a way the mind could easily file away. You became something they could not fully have and could not fully release. That is worse than a clear ending. A clean goodbye hurts, but at least it tells the mind what happened. This did not do that. This stayed open. This left a door unlocked in the back of their thoughts. And whatever the mind cannot settle, it circles, it returns, it questions. It turns over the same moments again and again, hoping the answer will change. That is the trap. They do not cry because they miss you in a simple way. They cry because you now live in a space their control cannot reach. You are not fully present, but you are not fully gone. And that space in between is where people slowly wear down. If this feels familiar, keep listening, because the deepest part has not even started yet. The subconscious does not handle almost very well. It does not understand partial endings, unfinished feelings, or emotional stories that stop in the middle and never explain themselves. So instead of closing the file, it reopens it, again and again. It replays moments, changes details, studies old memories from new angles, and tries to force meaning out of what still feels unresolved. That is why being almost loved can feel more intense than being rejected outright. Rejection draws a hard line. It tells the system the story is done, the path is blocked, the energy must go somewhere else. But almost being chosen is different. It keeps hope alive just enough to make detachment difficult. It leaves behind moments that felt real enough to trust but not solid enough to become a life. And that mixture creates a special kind of unrest. They tell themselves it was not that serious. They say they should be over it by now. They act like it has already faded. But behavior always tells the truth when thoughts try to lie. Late at night, when the world gets quiet and distractions finally step aside, their mind starts bringing back everything they tried to bury during the day. Why did it feel so easy with you? Why did the connection feel natural without effort? Why does someone they are trying to forget keep returning without permission? Those questions do not come once. They come in loops, and every loop pulls them deeper into something they keep pretending they already escaped. They go back to old messages, but not for comfort. Not really. They go back to investigate. They read your words like there must be some hidden answer tucked between the lines. They study your tone. They remember the rhythm of your replies. They replay pauses, silences, and moments that seemed small at the time, but now feel loaded with meaning. The human mind does this when it cannot accept uncertainty. It starts acting like a detective inside its own pain. It believes that if it looks carefully enough, it will finally find the missing piece that explains everything. But there is no final clue waiting there. No perfect sentence, no one detail that makes the whole thing suddenly painless. Still, they search, because searching feels better than accepting that some things never explain themselves in a way the heart can use. And here is the part they rarely admit even to themselves. They are not only replaying what happened, they are rebuilding what could have happened. They create alternate scenes, different timing, different choices, different words, a version where you stayed longer, a version where both of you said what needed to be said before it was too late, a version where the feeling had somewhere to go instead of becoming emotional smoke trapped in memory. But every imagined version ends the same way. It is not real, and the crash back into reality is what hurts. So if you have ever wondered why someone can seem fine and still carry hidden sadness, this is why. The body may move on schedule, the mind does not always follow. On the surface they seem composed, functional, even detached. They talk normally, they keep up with life. They may even convince other people that nothing important happened. But inside they split in two. One part of them keeps walking forward, handling responsibilities, making plans, doing what needs to be done. The other part stays behind in emotional residue that never dissolved. That is the real conflict. Consciously, they decided it was finished. Subconsciously, nothing ever signed that paper. Nothing inside them agreed to closure. So they live in two states at once. This is why new people can make them uneasy in ways they do not fully understand. Someone gets close, and instead of feeling excited, something in them freezes. Not because the new person did something wrong, but because closeness now touches a wound that still has not healed. They may say your name no longer affects them, yet the smallest echo of your presence can still shift their whole mood. A phrase, a song, a type of silence, a certain time of night, a familiar look in someone else's eyes, and suddenly the body reacts before logic can catch up. That is how deep emotional imprint works. It does not ask permission. It does not care what story they are telling the world. It simply rises when something reminds it of what it once felt. And if you are still here, notice this carefully. People do not always suffer because they lost someone. Sometimes they suffer because part of them is still organized around a connection that no longer exists in real life. The deeper truth is even harder to face. They are not only grieving you, they are grieving the version of themselves that existed when they were close to you. That is why this stays with such force. Around you, maybe they felt seen without effort. Maybe they felt understood without needing to explain every corner of themselves. Maybe for a short time they stopped editing who they were. They stopped managing their image. They stopped performing. They simply existed, and that felt rare. Losing that is not just losing a person. It is losing a state of being. It is losing access to a version of the self that felt more alive, more natural, more emotionally honest. So now when they miss you, they are also missing the person they became in your presence. They miss how easy it was to breathe. They miss how quickly walls dropped. They miss how real they felt when they were not trying so hard to be understood. And this is exactly why moving on becomes confusing. Because what they want back is not only you, it is that inner opening. It is that sense of emotional arrival. It is that rare feeling of not being fragmented inside their own life. Once someone experiences that, ordinary connections can start to feel flatter by comparison. Not because every new person is wrong, not because nothing good can happen again, but because the nervous system remembers depth. It remembers where it felt most awake, and until that wound is understood, they keep looking outside for something they actually lost inside. So they try to recreate it. They meet new people. They start fresh conversations. They give themselves speeches about healing, growth, and moving on. They tell themselves this is healthy, this is progress, this is what adults do. And maybe part of that is true. But something still refuses to line up. A laugh sounds different. A conversation feels thinner. A moment that should land does not reach the same depth. A silence feels empty instead of meaningful. And they notice, even when they do not want to, even when they feel guilty for comparing. That guilt matters, because it shows they are trying. They want the new experience to feel clean. They want it to be untouched by memory. But memory does not leave just because something new appears. Emotional imprint is not erased by replacement. It stays until it is faced. That is why they begin blaming the outside world. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe people are too shallow. Maybe no one knows how to connect anymore. But the real issue is often more private than that. Something in them is still tied to an unfinished emotional pattern, and everything new has to pass through it. That is exhausting. It makes them pull back when they want to lean in. It makes them doubt people who have done nothing to deserve doubt. It makes them crave connection while fearing the exact depth they say they want. And if you know this feeling, then you know how strange it is to want new love while still standing in the shadow of something old that never truly closed. Because suppression does not remove emotional weight, it only delays its return. They can fill the day with activity, noise, routine, work, screens, conversations, and small distractions that keep the mind busy enough to stay above the feeling. They can outrun it for hours, sometimes even for weeks. But eventually, the quiet comes back. Night arrives, the room stills, the phone stops lighting up, the body gets tired enough that the guard drops, and then it returns, not always as a clear thought, often as heaviness, a strange emptiness, a sudden lack of interest in everything around them, a wave they cannot explain. That is what unresolved feeling does. It changes form. It moves through the system in ways that do not always look like heartbreak. Sometimes it looks like irritability. Sometimes it looks like detachment. Sometimes it looks like disappearing from people who care. Sometimes it looks like staring at the ceiling with a chest full of pressure and no words ready for it. They may not even say your name in those moments, but the emotional pattern still belongs to what happened, or to what almost happened, and because it is not fully conscious, it feels harder to control. That is when memory becomes less like a thought and more like a place. They slip back into certain scenes, certain tones, certain unfinished conversations. They do not choose it. It arrives, and once it arrives, it reshapes the whole evening. This is why hidden grief lasts so long. It is not always loud enough to confront directly, but it is never quiet enough to disappear on its own. They imagine conversations that never happened. They rebuild endings that could have gone differently. They create alternate timelines where timing worked. Fear did not interfere. Distance did not matter. Pride softened, and both people met the moment fully instead of only brushing against it. This is one of the mind's oldest defenses. If reality hurts, imagination offers temporary relief. For a few minutes, they get to stand inside a version of life where nothing was left hanging. But relief built on fantasy never lasts. Reality always returns, and when it does, it cuts sharper, because it reminds them that possibility and truth are not the same thing. That is when the tears come. Not as spectacle, not as performance, but as something low and heavy and unavoidable. The tears are not only for what happened, they are for what never got the chance to become real. They are for the almost, for the near future that once felt possible, for the emotional home that was visible for a moment and then disappeared before they could step inside it. This is why unfinished connection leaves such a deep mark. The mind gives extra weight to open loops. It keeps feeding them energy because it believes the story might still need an ending. And as long as that hope survives in any hidden corner, full release feels impossible. So they remain suspended, not fully in the past, not fully in the present, held in that painful middle where memory keeps breathing and closure never fully arrives. If this is hitting deep, stay with me, because this middle state changes more than just how they remember you. It changes how they move through life. They continue functioning. That is what makes it so easy to miss. They show up, they answer people, they handle daily life. They may even look stronger than before, but internally, something stays slightly out of place. There is a hesitation in new closeness, a soft resistance to being fully seen, a habit of pulling back just when something real begins to grow. And they do not always understand why. Nothing in the present seems serious enough to justify the reaction, so they assume the problem must be external. The timing is off, the chemistry is lacking, the other person is not enough. But often what is missing is not outside, it is unresolved inside. What happened with you was not ordinary to them. It activated something deeper than attraction. It touched identity. It stirred parts of them that had been asleep, guarded or long denied. That kind of activation leaves an imprint. Time alone does not erase it. Time can soften edges, yes, but it does not complete what the mind still experiences as unfinished. That is why some people keep looking successful, stable, even emotionally available, while secretly feeling like nothing reaches the same depth anymore. They are not necessarily trapped by you as a person. They are trapped by what was awakened and never settled. And until that is named, everything feels slightly distorted. They judge the present through the lens of an unresolved past. They chase intensity when they actually need clarity. They search for the feeling in other faces, other voices, other late-night talks, while the original wound keeps waiting to be understood. And here is something even more uncomfortable. Part of them may not want to fully let go, not because pain feels good, but because letting go would mean accepting that the possibility is really dead. As long as they hold a little ache, a little curiosity, a little private replaying, some hidden part of the story stays alive. This is why they revisit what hurts them. This is why they keep old messages longer than they should. This is why they sometimes check, wonder, imagine, compare, and quietly return to a memory they claim no longer matters. Pain can become a bridge to possibility. If the feeling is still active, then maybe the ending is not final. Maybe something could still happen. Maybe life could still circle back. Maybe all of this meant more than silence now suggests. Hope hides inside strange places. Sometimes it hides inside grief itself. And that makes release even harder. Because to heal fully, they would have to grieve not only the loss, but also the fantasy, the potential, the future they built in secret. They would have to admit that some beautiful things do not become lasting things, and some deep feelings do not become shared lives. That truth is hard. It asks for maturity. It asks for surrender. It asks them to stop negotiating with what already ended in everything but emotion. So instead, they hover. They tell themselves they are fine. They tell others it is old news. But alone, the truth speaks differently. Alone, they still feel the tug of what was never completed. And that unfinished pull keeps drawing small amounts of energy from them, day after day, until they finally face it, or it shapes them without permission. Still, there is another side to this. The reason it hurts so much is also the reason it matters. A connection like that reveals something. It shows them what depth feels like. It proves they are capable of feeling more than surface attraction, more than routine comfort, more than convenient attachment. It exposes the part of them that wants truth, intensity, emotional honesty, and a bond that reaches below performance. That is not weakness. That is revelation. The pain comes when they confuse the one who awakened that depth with the only person who could ever awaken it. Those are not always the same thing. Yes, you may have touched something rare in them. Yes, what they felt may have been real. Yes, your absence may still echo in ways they cannot explain. But the deeper lesson is not that their life ended there. The deeper lesson is that something in them came alive, and now they have to learn how to meet that part of themselves without depending on your presence to access it. That is the work. Not to erase the memory, not to pretend the feeling was small, not to force indifference, but to understand what was opened, what was projected, what was unfinished, and what can still be carried forward without staying emotionally chained to the past. This is the part many people skip. They either romanticize the pain or run from it. But healing asks for something harder. It asks them to sit still long enough to separate the person from the awakening, the memory from the meaning, the almost from the truth. And when they finally do that, the story changes. So yes, they may be crying in private. They may be carrying more than they ever let the world see. They may still look composed while something in them aches quietly at night. They may still feel the strange pull of a connection that was never fully theirs and never fully gone. But beneath all of that, something important is happening. They are being forced to face the places in themselves that depend on unfinished stories to feel alive. They are being shown how easily the mind worships what it cannot complete. They are learning that closure does not always arrive from the outside, from one final message, one explanation, one perfect conversation, or one last look. Sometimes closure is built slowly, privately, painfully, by telling the truth to yourself without waiting for anyone else to confirm it. That is why this kind of heartbreak is so silent. It is not just about missing someone. It is about outgrowing illusion without becoming cynical. It is about honoring what was felt without surrendering your future to what never fully formed. And maybe that is the hardest part of all. To admit that something can be real, powerful, unforgettable, and still not be meant to stay. If you understood every word of this, then you already know the hidden cost of unfinished connection. You know how a person can smile in daylight and unravel in the dark. You know how memory can feel alive long after the moment is gone. And you know this too. What remains unresolved will keep asking for your attention until you either return to it forever or finally release it with both hands and walk forward for real,